Hello everyone and welcome back. We're going to be looking at all of these different examples and how we can factorize quadratics today. So factorizing quadratics, one of the most important fundamental skills that appears all throughout everything we do in algebra, really, in the senior school in year 11 and year 12. Today we've got 4 examples. The difference between my examples is simply what I'm doing with the signs here, whether I have, I'll make this a bit bigger, whether I have pluses or I have minuses. That's really the only thing that's changing. We'll talk about all the different considerations and how to do these questions lightning fast. That way we can get full marks in the exam and also save heaps of time to move on to the harder questions. So let's get into it with the very first example. I know it says example 2, but this is part of a series where we looked at expanding quadratics in the last video. That was example number 1. We have basically 4 examples today on how to factorize quadratics. When I'm factorizing quadratics, the main thing that I'm looking for here is 2 numbers that multiply to give my number on the end. So I want numbers that multiply to give this number on the end here, and also add to give my number in the middle. Okay, so I need to multiply to give 4, add to give 5. Now the training wheels on approach, how we start by doing this is I make myself a good old-fashioned little factor list of all my factors. For 4, I've got factors of 4 and 1. I've also got 2 and 2. I'm now going to look at my pairs and think, okay, well, if I add these numbers together, which of these numbers add to equal 5? And I can see my very first pair of 4 plus 1 adds to equal 5. Now, these numbers are small. It's pretty easy to see that without running out of factor trees. But if we are struggling, this is where we start. I'm going to do this for all the examples we have today. But if you don't need it, you go straight to the answer. Please jump straight to the answer. That is what we want you to do. We want you to develop that fluency. So what ends up happening is I write my factorized form, very similar. If I actually flick back to what we looked at in the last video, similar to this form here where I'm in brackets, this is a factorized form. I'm kind of the opposite of the expanding stuff we looked at in the last video. So I'm going to factorize. I know I'm going to have 2 sets of brackets. Both of my sets of brackets are going to have an x at the beginning, because if you remember from our FOIL, x multiplied by x is going to give x squared. That is the leading term in my quadratics. So the numbers I need to go inside my brackets are the numbers I got here and got here. They are both positive numbers, so I'm going to write plus 4 and plus 1. The order in which I write these numbers really doesn't matter. They all give the exact same answer. Okay, so the strategies are: write out a factor list for my number on the end, and then figure out which of those pairs of numbers add to give my number in the middle. If they don't add to give the number in the middle, that is a separate sort of question archetype, so to speak. We'll cover that in another video. So, example 2. What makes example 2 different? Well, what makes example 2 different is very simple. In example 2, or I guess technically example 3, I have a negative sign here in front of my minus, or my 7x, okay? But I have a positive sign here. And if we remember our stuff about mathematics, we should know that I have 2 ways to multiply numbers and get a positive answer. Either they are both positive or they are both negative, but they have to be sort of a pair, right? Well, if my sign in front of this term, my b term, for people that know the general formula of a quadratic, the sign in front of my b term, if that's negative, then it means the pair of numbers must also be negative. So I can still do the same step 1. I can still make my factor tree. Now 12 has a few more factors. I have 1 and 12. I've got 2 and 6. I've got 4 and 3. But instead of adding them together, if I know they both have to be negative numbers, I'm going to make both of my numbers negative. Now, if I do this, I'm basically subtracting my numbers now. Well, I wind up with minus 1 minus 12 gives negative 13, minus 2 minus 6 gives negative 8, and minus 4 minus 3 gives negative 7, and I've found my pair of numbers. I can now put these in brackets, and I wind up with x, that's a little bit messy, apologies, minus 4, x minus 3, and that is my factorized form for x squared minus 7x plus 12. Okay, the third version of this question. I've now changed it up a little bit. I have a minus sign. Why is my pen not working? Let me just quickly screw. Why does this always seem to be happening every now and then? Apologies, my pen is now fixed. So for example 4, I now have a negative sign here. So because I have a negative sign here, I now need to multiply 2 numbers and get a negative, which means I have 2 options. They can either be a positive and a negative, or a negative and a positive. We kind of don't really mind for our order. All I need to know is they need to be different signs. 1 plus, 1 minus. So now I want to have a look at my sign in front of my b term, the second term here, this 2. And I realize that this number here is also positive. That means that the bigger number in the pair must also be positive. So I write out my factor list. I wind up with my factors of 15 are 5 and 3. They're also 1 and 15. And this time I know I need to make my bigger number positive in both cases. I know I could make my bigger numbers on the left. That would have been clever, but I just didn't think about it too much. My bigger number is going to be positive. My smaller number is going to be negative. If I do my first pair, I get 5 minus 3. That is going to give 2. If I do my second pair, just for the sake of showing how to do it, I wind up with negative 1 plus 15, which is going to give 14. Okay, so both give positive answers because the bigger number is positive, which is why that is why the bigger number is positive. So now I get my pair. I can see if I look at my pair here, I've got positive 5 minus 3 is equal to 2. So I found my pair of numbers that multiply to give negative 15, add to give positive 2. Again, I'm going to write these into brackets, and I get x plus 5, x minus 3. And again, the order for our brackets, either way I write them, I could write them this way as well, both answers are completely correct. Either or is fine, okay? They can go in either order. We are multiplying. When I multiply numbers, the order is not important. Final example. The final example is when they're both negative, and it's really the same logic as what I did in the example before. I've got a minus sign here, so both of my signs have to be different, a positive and a negative. Well, if I've got a minus sign here in front of my negative 7x, I've got a negative 7x, then I have the bigger number has to be negative, okay? So again, I get my list of numbers. I've got 6 and 3. I've got, what have I got? I've got 2 and 9, and I've also got 1 and 18. Again, the bigger number has to be negative, so that means my 6 is going to be negative, my 9 is going to be negative, my 18 is going to be negative, and my smaller numbers are going to be positive. So if I now... Oh, I got my colors different for the final example, apologies. If I now sum these two things together, negative 6 plus 3 is going to give minus 3. 2 minus 9 gives negative 7, and 1 minus 18 gives negative 17. And again, oh sorry, I got across just a touch, if I can. I can't, I need my lasso, apologies. Let me grab this, move it across just a tiny bit. Still didn't go across enough, I should have actually looked. There we go. And I can see the pair of numbers I have that I need is this pair here, okay? I've got positive 2 and I've got negative 9. 2 minus 9 gives negative 7 and it multiplies to give negative 18. So again, I write my numbers in my brackets. I've got x plus 2 and I've got x minus 9. And that is how I factorize every single type of monic quadratic. For ones that are non-monic where I have a number in front of my x squared term, that will be coming in the next video. So stay tuned or subscribe if you want to see more maths content. I have an entire playlist made on quadratics. I'm going to cover everything all the way through pretty much every single skill that we need for quadratics. So feel free to subscribe to make sure you see those videos, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Goodbye, everyone.